Hi. After listening through today's episode, there were a few things I wanted to address. First off, although there is one at the beginning of the episode, I do want to give a trigger warning. I am talking about sexual assault today, and I know that that will be a hard topic for many of us. Within the episode, I use the term stress response, but after listening to it, I feel like that kind of downplays what we experience. And so let me acknowledge here for what it is. It is trauma response. What that looks like for me may look different for you. Trauma response quite often for me is psychosomatic itching. Super fun. For you, it may be something else. Quite often, it's our breathing becomes very shallow. Our chest feels tight. We feel panicked or trapped. Know your body. Know what those trauma responses look like so you can help yourself. I will be putting some PTSD resources in the show notes. Now, I apologize if any of this feels incomplete. This was a very personal and hard episode to record. We will talk more about sexual assault in its various forms at other times. But some of those conversations I do want to have with guests. So it's not just me talking, but we're actually having a conversation. That being said, you may hear some chair creaking in today's episode. We chose to leave this episode fairly raw as far as editing goes. The chair creaking is my producer. He chose to be in-house with me while I recorded. He knew it was going to be a very hard one for me to record, and he didn't want me doing it alone. I did think the episode would run longer than it did, but for the subject matter, I think it was just right. So hang on. Remember to breathe. And remember, you are not alone. Here's today's episode. Good afternoon and welcome to A Glimpse of the Feminine. I am your host, Tracy, and I'm not going to chit-chat today because I think this one might go a little bit long. I do want to start with a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about rape today. And I'm going to talk about Bathsheba, but I'm also going to talk about you and I. And so I do want to give that warning before we get started. I also want to let you know that in the show notes, there will be a rape hotline number and their website and stuff. I don't really know that much about it, but I did want to provide a resource if you need it. So, let's talk about Bathsheba. All of my life, I saw her as a seductress, tempting King David, bathing out where she could be seen. I mean, yeah, he should have been off at war, so he held some culpability. But that Bathsheba, this is how 2 Samuel chapter 11 is so often taught in the church. I want to say by men, but it's taught this way by women as well, although that is beginning to change. As I have gone on the journey of questioning much of what I've been taught and remodeling my faith, I've begun to see her story differently. When we stop looking at Bathsheba as a temptress and start looking at her as a woman, it hits differently. When we read through her story as a survivor of rape, her story really hits differently. And this is important. The way the church has taught 2 Samuel 11 is wrong. And it does a disservice not only to Bathsheba, but to the women sitting in the pews. In the United States, nearly 1 in 2 women have experienced some form of unwanted sexual contact, with 1 in 5 women experiencing completed or attempted rape. These are our mothers, sisters, daughters, girlfriends, wives. If you are alive, you know a woman who's been sexually assaulted in some way, whether you realize it or not. How we handle Bathsheba's story, as well as the other women in the Old Testament, is relevant to the women in the pews, because statistically, about half of them can relate to her. It might be the difference between added shame or a step towards healing. 2 Samuel 11 and 12 tell Bathsheba's story. It's too long to read the entire thing here, so I'm going to read some of the story and then just relate some of the other parts. 2 Samuel 11 starts with, in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness, and then she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So Bathsheba lets David know she's pregnant, and David immediately sends to the battlefield for her husband. He thinks he'll bring him home, he'll sleep with his wife, crisis averted. But Uriah doesn't sleep with his wife. He says to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. So David tries getting him drunk and sending him home to his wife, but that doesn't work either. So then David writes a letter to Joab telling him to set Uriah at the front of a battle and then pull back everybody else so that Uriah is killed in the heat of the battle. And then sends it with Uriah to give to his commander. Joab does as David asks, sending Uriah to a spot where he knows valiant men are fighting, and then he pulls the rest of the warriors back so that Uriah is killed. After Bathsheba's mourning period is over, David takes her into his house and takes her as a wife. As we move to chapter 12, Nathan the prophet goes to David to confront him. Verse 1-7 tells us, "And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, 'There were 2 men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat of his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, 'As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb 4-fold because he did this thing, and because he had no pity.' Nathan then tells David, he is the man. And because of the sin of raping Bathsheba and having Uriah killed, there will be several consequences. But the consequence I want to focus on is the death of Bathsheba's baby. 2 Samuel 12:15-18 says, "And the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became sick. David therefore sought God on behalf of the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. And the elders of his house stood beside him to raise him from the ground. But he would not, nor did he eat food with them. And on the 7th day the child died." When David is told the child has died, he gets up, he cleans up, he spends time worshiping the Lord, and then he goes into Bathsheba and comforts her by having sex. And she conceives Solomon. So let's talk about Bathsheba. A woman much maligned over the centuries. I was just reading online a Bible study a woman had put together, and the assumptions she makes about Bathsheba and her guilt in this narrative are astounding. I couldn't even read clear through it. It was bad. But she isn't doing that in a vacuum. This is how the church teaches about Bathsheba and David. Bathsheba is cleansing herself from her monthly uncleanness. She's doing what God requires, which would lead us to believe that she is a godly woman. I don't know about the setup of homes in the ancient Near East, and that's kind of how I ran across that Bible study. But wherever she was taking her bath was probably the normal place. We can probably assume that she had the, what word do I want? Presumption of privacy. And I grew up believing that Bathsheba was taking her bath on a roof. The scripture does not say that. It says David was on the roof. It doesn't say Bathsheba was. He could have seen her through a window. Or maybe she was in a private courtyard. But she probably wasn't thinking about how sexy and hot she looked, because she just finished her period. How sexy and hot do you feel? Nothing in the scripture leads us to believe that what she was doing was unusual. Scripture says David was not where he was supposed to be. It doesn't say Bathsheba wasn't. David, even after finding out that she is the daughter of one of his mighty men, one of the 30, and the wife of another of his 30, still sends for her. There is no indication that she knew why the king was requesting her presence. He has many wives. We know of at least 7 by name. And we also know from when Nathan was talking with him that he had all of Saul's wives as well, plus all the concubines. And she's married to one of his mighty men. So why would she assume that he was calling her to the palace for anything sexual? If your husband is one of the king's mighty men and he's at war, and then the king is calling you to the palace, you might assume, I would, that something has happened to your husband. Once she's in the palace and aware of what's happening, who could she call on for help? He's the king, after all. And who's going to tell him no? I mean, let's be real. They went and got her and brought her to him. They're not going to help her. And who's going to hold him accountable? So he rapes her and sends her home. used, broken, ashamed. And then she discovers that she's pregnant. She sends word to him. What else is she going to do? Everyone knew Uriah was at war, and she just had her monthlies. So I don't even know what she must have been feeling. Panicked is probably an understatement, because now her life's in danger. According to Old Testament law, a woman caught in adultery could be stoned. I do want to reiterate, this was not adultery. She was raped. But who's going to believe that the king raped her? The assumption would have been that she'd been unfaithful to Uriah. And how could she even have dreamed that that revelation would have led to David putting a hit out on her husband and having him killed? So then Nathan goes to David and confronts him. In the parable, he tells David, he equates Bathsheba with a slaughtered ewe lamb. Not just stolen, killed. But this is accurate. What happens when a woman is raped? She dies. Who she was prior to the rape is no longer alive after the rape. Her autonomy, her safety, her ability to trust, it's all gone. Her confidence, any sense of control over her life she had, gone. In its place, fear, shame, the weight of blame. If only I hadn't gone there. If only I hadn't left my drink. If only I had paid attention to those red flags, etc., etc., etc. Even in a situation like Bathsheba's, where she was in her home and spied upon, she had no ability to say no. I bet she was thinking, if only I'd bathed earlier in the day, or later, or. We women are so good at second-guessing ourselves and believing that we're to blame somehow. And our culture reinforces that. So let me be clear. And this is something that I personally struggle with as well. All the blame, all the shame, all of it belongs to the rapist, not you. You are not to blame.
doesn't matter what you did or didn't do, where you went, what you wore, or what you said. Maybe you didn't say no. Maybe you agreed because you thought the experience would be enjoyable. And it ended up being about power and control. And at that point, saying no wasn't an option, even though every part of your being screamed it. But to say no could mean danger beyond rape. You still are not to blame. It was still rape. And your body knows it, even if your brain wants to deny or take the blame. Our bodies will tell us what happened. If this has happened to you, please find someone safe you can tell. If you haven't told anyone and are experiencing stress response within your body, speaking what happened to you to a safe person can help. It can help your body and your nervous system to settle. Speak the truth to your body when it begins to act up. It does help. You have a stress response going on and you know it's connected to that. Tell your body, tell her, you were raped. It was scary. But it was not your fault. It was his fault. You did what you could to survive. It's okay. You're not to blame. Speak it out loud so your body is hearing you. Let her know that you know. You recognize what she's been through. You support her. Bathsheba lost everything. She lost who she was. Can you imagine? Her rapist was the king. She was in her own home. So home is no longer safe. She lost getting to have children with Uriah. She was widowed by her rapist. She was then taken into her rapist's home and taken as a wife. Not the wife, but one of many. She then loses her baby as well as a result of her rapist's sin. And then again is impregnated by her rapist when he comes in to comfort her. That is the child that would grow to be Solomon, the king of Judah. But as any of us who have buried a child know, nothing replaces the one that died. some of us will never see our rapist again. Some of us will face them in court. Some of us will never report. And that's okay too. Some of us live with our rapist because marital rape is alive and well. Rape is always violence against the survivor. But some of us are beaten or worse along with the rape. Some of us didn't have any physical damage beyond the rape itself. Some of us wonder if the rape was really rape because we're married to the perpetrator, or the perpetrator didn't act violent, or we aren't sure if consent was needed. It was. There is no one size fits all when it comes to rape. And while one may carry more physical scars, they all carry heavy, deep, emotional and mental scars. Bathsheba would have understood. She too was a survivor of rape. I knew it the first time I read 2 Samuel after I became a survivor. My body felt it. My nervous system couldn't ignore what David did to her. And then I was outraged that the church has done her dirty too. By not telling the truth about Bathsheba, the church perpetuates shame around survivors of sexual abuse, and it needs to stop. The truth needs to be told, and women need to be safe. We need to be safe on the streets and in our homes, and safe within our faith communities to be able to tell our stories and not be shamed. If you have survived rape or any other form of sexual assault, you are not alone. You are not to blame. You do not need to carry shame. It was not your fault. Until next time, take care.